People used to treat me like I was nothing, just another face in a crowd that should be invisible. Julian Carter, the man you see dragged off the plane, wasn't just a passenger. I was the founder of Stratus, the architect behind a $480 million encryption system. I was on my way to seal a groundbreaking deal, but all that promise was shattered in an instant when I showed my boarding pass. The flight attendant, Chloe, looked at me with an expression I recognized all too well, one that dismissed my existence. "Sir, you need to move," she commanded, as if my mere presence was a threat. I stood my ground, my heart pounding, knowing the weight of history pressed down on my shoulders. As airport police escorted me off, the silence of the other passengers screamed louder than any protest. I walked off the plane, my head held high, feeling the unjust sting of that moment wash over me. Then came the call from Camille, my best friend and legal partner. She promised to escalate the situation, stirring a sense of urgency within me. Moments later, as Captain Dean Holloway approached, visibly shaken, I knew that this incident might spark something bigger than my own humiliation. It was my chance to turn this injustice around, to demand accountability not just for myself, but for all who had been silenced before me. And so my story transformed from one of being dragged away to reclaiming my narrative, starting a conversation that could no longer be ignored. In the echo of that airplane's silence, I found my voice, and it was more powerful than ever. "Submerged, sir, I need you to step aside." Chloe's voice cut through the cabin like a knife, her gaze cold and unwavering. Julian looked up from his seat, a complete stranger to chaos. "What? Fleeing. Just follow me, please." She interrupted, her tone laced with authority as if she wielded the very rules of the sky. His heart raced, but he kept his voice steady. "What seems to be the issue? I have my boarding pass right here." Ron, the supervisor, leaned in, folding his arms. "Look, we don't have time for this. Just comply." A low murmur rippled through the cabin, eyes darting between Julian and the two staff. He stood, square-shouldered, refusing to let fear dictate his response. "I'm not a threat. You're clearly making a mistake." "Move or we'll have to call security," Ron warned, a smugness about him that twisted Julian's stomach. Shocked faces surrounded him, some averting eyes in discomfort, while others silently seethed, but no one intervened. Julian's dignity hung in the balance, each unspoken word linking him to centuries of systemic injustice. When airport police arrived, the atmosphere thickened, the weight of history pressing down. "This is wrong," Julian murmured, breathless, feeling every heartbeat echoing his resolve. As they led him off the plane, a wave of shame flooded him. "Hold on," a passenger finally shouted, voice cracking with the effort. "Too late," Ron spat, dismissing their shared humanity. Fury simmered inside Julian as he stepped into the sterile waiting room, burdened yet determined. He wasn't finished. This wasn't just about him, it was about everyone. Julian sat quietly in his seat, the hum of the airplane engines a calming reassurance against the turbulence of an unseen storm. He clutched his boarding pass, a small triumph amidst larger battles. Just moments before, he had been immersed in thoughts of his upcoming project, an innovative encryption system that promised to revolutionize data security. But as the flight attendant's sharp voice cut through his reverie, his heart sank. Chloe, her eyes narrowed and assessing, demanded he move. "You can't sit here," she insisted, venom lacing her words. Julian's calm began to shift, frustration boiling beneath the surface. "I have a right to this seat," he replied, voice steady but firm. Yet, the arrival of airport police felt like the culmination of a long history. One written in silent indignities, where compliance equated to survival. As he was escorted off the plane, a whirlwind of emotions swirled around him. Anger, disbelief, but most painfully, a profound sense of isolation. In the holding room, staring at his reflection in the glass where blurred faces of passengers watched, Julian's resolve began to harden, the humiliation morphing into a quiet fury. The phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Camille, her voice cutting through the thick atmosphere. "Julian, I'm escalating this. You deserve better." He felt a flicker of determination. Then he saw Captain Dean Holloway approach, a man caught between fear and accountability. "I'm so sorry," Dean stammered. In that moment, the weight of Julian's suffering converged tensed energy. "I'll return, but only if Chloe and Ron are removed, and they publicly acknowledge the truth." A silence enveloped them, charged with unspoken resolve. A pivotal moment, Julian's voice resonated louder than the oppressive silence around him, foreshadowing the revolution that was about to unfold. As Julian stood there, heart hammering, he felt a sharp sense of clarity wash over him. The flight attendant's steely gaze only fueled his quiet determination. "I won't be moved without cause," he stated, voice steady, cutting through the murmur of disbelief around him. The airport police had arrived, but he wouldn't let fear dictate his actions. "I know my rights," he reminded himself, feeling the invisible weight of countless others who had faced similar injustices. In the holding room, his phone buzzed. "Julian, I'm escalating this," Camille said, her voice a fire of support. The warmth of her resolve wrapped around him, emboldening him. When Captain Dean Holloway stepped forward, Julian straightened. "I appreciate your apology," he replied evenly, holding the captain's gaze. "But I want transparency. Remove those who disrespected me." The captain nodded, recognizing the necessity of Julian's conditions not just for himself, but for others who had been silenced. As he boarded the plane again, he felt different. Arrival at his seat wasn't just a return, it was a reclamation. Dean's voice echoed through the cabin, "We must do better." Julian's experience cannot be ignored. Gasps filled the air. A ripple of support surged from passengers who had previously remained apathetic. "Thank you for speaking up," Anna, a nearby passenger, whispered. The acknowledgement, though soft, felt like a victory. Julian's heart swelled with purpose as the news lit up social media, a shift emerging that had long been overdue. The weight of injustice, met with small, determined victories, signaled the start of a much larger fight. Julian stood in the aisle of the plane, heart racing but demeanor calm, as two airport police officers approached him. Passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some whispering, others staring, yet few dared to speak up. As Julian was escorted off, he carried not just his briefcase, but the weight of generations of struggle against prejudice. The world outside the plane's window blurred by a harsh contrast to the stillness of his elegant resolve. Moments later, he sat in the holding room, the injustice settling deeply within him. His phone vibrated. Camille's voice, as fierce as it was nurturing, rushed in. "They can't get away with this. I'm on it. Just wait." A combative fire ignited in Julian. They wouldn't silence him. Out of nowhere, the pilot, Dean Holloway, approached, his face drawn with concern. He stammered an apology, the regret palpable in his voice. I didn't know they would treat you like that." The shame hung heavy in the air, an atmosphere ripe for transformation. "I'll return," said Julian, determination surging. "But I want Chloe and Ron gone, and I expect you to address everyone on that flight. The truth needs to be shared." The pilot nodded vehemently, realizing the gravity of accountability. As Julian reboarded, a silence enveloped the cabin, each seat feeling alive with anticipation. Dean stepped forward, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen, please listen. Mr. Carter was unjustly removed due to a misunderstanding rooted in bias. I am deeply sorry." The realization washed over the passengers, their disbelief shifting into support. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the cabin as social media lit up with outrage and solidarity. In the aftermath, waves of accountability crashed upon the airline's shores. Stocks plummeted and calls for systemic change echoed. Camille and Julian launched Project Latitude, a beacon of hope and equity reforms in an industry long overdue for transformation. Amidst the storm, a quiet triumph settled in Julian's heart. He had shifted the narrative from silence to strength, empowering others to speak up against injustice. Anna, a passenger who bore witness, later shared, "Julian showed us all what it means to stand tall. His strength was a call to conscience." This was the moment, in that seated audience, justice wasn't a loud roar, but a resolute whisper shared amongst those who finally dared to see. As I sit here reflecting on that day, the weight of it all still lingers. My heart raced as I stepped off the plane, feeling both humiliated and resolute. I'd spent years building a company and a life fueled by integrity, yet in a matter of minutes, I was reduced to just a black man being forcibly removed from a flight. I remember the silence of my fellow passengers, their eyes averted, their discomfort palpable. But it was that moment of accountability with Captain Holloway that surprised me, the courage to confront the truth shining through amid the chaos. I returned to that seat not just for myself, but for everyone silenced in similar moments. I hope my experience catalyzes change, igniting conversations about injustice and empathy within our society. So I ask you, have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between standing up for yourself or staying silent? How did it shape who you are today? I invite you to share your stories and insights in the comments. Let's talk about power, bias, and justice together.